This is a coping mechanism podcast.
This is a coping mechanism podcast.
This is a coping mechanism podcast.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to another exciting episode of This is a Coping Mechanism podcast. I am one of your hosts, Ted Anderson, along with my wonderful co-host,
As always, Bessie, and join us in how we cope with this satire life with movies, media, mysteries, and more.
Ooh.
Today, we're getting into season 1 of White Lotus, but just the premise, kind of idea of just what the show White Lotus.
And we're going to be talking about our experiences in the service industry, and which is a lot.
And I'm sure some of you will be able to relate or even know people who have told you horrendous stories of being on the other side.
Yeah, and being like, people are fine, right? No.
No, not even close.
I have, this isn't about the show, but it is a fun little story that happened to me yesterday where a friend of mine had come over and I was finishing up the first season. I think I had like 20 minutes left of the last episode. And, but I was watching this showcase, doesn't matter. My friend comes in and he just like came in and came over and was like, I came in and I saw your notes, and I know I shouldn't just read notes, but like my video game brain turned on and I was like, oh, notes, I should read them. And the top page of this notes just says, don't trust white ladies. It's like, yeah. And he was like,
period.
Yeah, I guess it's just, that's all it said. I guess, I mean, it's applicable, but I was wondering what you were talking about. And I was like, oh, it's for the podcast.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I love it. So, for any of you who haven't watched it, we'll have some spoilers for sure, but the premise of this show is just kind of like the misadventures and exploitation of these guests and the workers at a very high-end resort.
Yeah.
And just kind of how it interacts and how they kind of like collide, I guess.
Exactly. It's the drama of
drama.
This, what is it, like 3 or 4 stories going on, and like these minor dramas with these very rich people and their dealings with
the workers.
Yeah, the hotel staff, and then also their kind of interpersonal dramas.
So we get a whole week. You get a whole week of just all of the mischief that's happening of what.
Which I have never seen anything, because I had never heard about the show. And I didn't even know, I've never heard the name or anything, and you were like, we're going to do this. Or you were like, this is the topic I want to do. And I was like, oh, that's a really good topic. I have horror stories of the service industry. I can talk about that. I have no idea what the White Lotus is. And you were like, I didn't look up a trailer. I didn't look up.
Oh, nice. You just went into it blind.
Went into it fully blind.
It's so good. Like you said,
it was.
There's not, I think there's like one other show that's a lot more campy that's kind of similar to it that I've heard about. But I feel like this was a really good foundation for just the idea of being a service worker in whatever capacity that might be.
This was real. This was real.
And it's very satire, which I like, because it still makes it enjoyable. Because if it was just seriousness of like, this is what it's like being a service worker, it would be too heavy and not enjoyable to watch.
Which, yeah, I think they offset really well with, I mean, some of the stuff is still like kind of TV dramatic.
Oh, for sure.
For instance, the opening of the show it's this one guy's character, and as usual, terrible with names. But the guy who's married to Alexandra Daddario in the show, he's waiting for his plane, and then some couple is like talking to him, and they say, oh, someone got killed at the hotel. And he was like, yeah, it sucked. He's like, don't fucking talk to me. And they're loading the human remains on the thing.
So you're wondering, oh, fuck, who died at the resort in that week? So that you get like the whole recap of what led to it.
I gotta be honest, I was watching this whole, because I didn't look up anything about it. And I was like, oh, it's gonna be a murder mystery.
Right.
but through the eyes of these like hotel staff who are like, I guess we still have to go change the sheets.
Right. Life
that is-
still keeps moving for the next round of people coming in.
Yeah, that's not what it is. That's
No.
not what it ended up being. But that's what I thought it was whenever I started it.
Yeah. And I think it just kind of definitely encapsulates just like the effects on tourism, especially like since it's in Hawaii. Definitely like a lot of capitalism stuff. And just kind of what appears on the outside is not what you get.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I like I said, we're not going to be going over this, too much, but I did some for this one. I only took notes about stuff that was like relevant to the topic instead of just taking notes about the show.
Right. We're not trying to be like a review podcast. Like we're just trying to tie together what we watch and how it involves real life.
But and then I had some questions that would like pop up for any episode of being like because I guess for a little bit of like so our experience.
Yeah.
I think we've already talked about a lot before that you are a
Barber.
Yeah, barber.
So the only job I've ever had, and so that is a very intimate customer service experience, and especially like working anywhere, you start off at the bottom. So that me being thrown into being a barber, cosmetologist, they don't teach you in school what people are really like.
Yeah.
And I kind of went into it at 18, still in high school, like, oh my god, is this what people are like? Like, this is fucking crazy.
And after a few years, you're like, yep, that's what it is.
And a few more years, and I'm like, you got me fucked up.
Yeah. Professionally, I did not start out in the service industry at all. I don't know if I've talked about this on this show before, but like I used to be I was like a ranch hand, I was a cowboy. I was a real cowboy in a literal sense, where I took cattle from different ranches to all across Texas and then sometimes out of state.
Right.
General laborer and stuff like that. And then whenever I got injured really bad, I couldn't keep doing it because it was too like detrimental to my health. So the first job I took was like at a call center, but that was still like removed. I would say the first service industry job that I had before I went on to like manage a Chipotle was I worked at this quasi-legal gambling hall called Lucky's Cove. And in Texas, gambling is illegal, but there are these weird little ways to get around it where they just play like video slots, and then they trade in their points for cash, and every point equals a penny, so it's it's a whole thing. And dear God, like it at Chipotle, I could deal with anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes people cried, and I'd be like, "What happened?" Like, this person yelled at me, and I'd be like, "Okay, you want to go to a town where, deal with some druggies who are fighting for that $5 they won, and let me tell you, you will see some shit."
I mean, even the show kind of starts off with the bang already on like how unaware most, I would say, I'll just talk about it in the show, but how very rich folk are depicted. Like it starts off with like the guest coming in, and she wanted a massage that day, and the masseuse was like, "Well, I'm fully booked today, but I can get you the," and she's already like, "Well, but I really want it today." And it's just like, you just think I can pull out a time out of my ass to give you this time? Like, I'm offering you something else. It already shows like that the pregnant worker having to hide she's pregnant. So it like already starts off with very realistic things that like you're dealing with in the industry.
they covered with Armand. That's the only character I know by name
Armand.
was
He's
Armand
the best.
because he is like the best character, and I've seen both with me having to be a manager and other
Yeah.
managers, I've seen like he really encompassed all that so perfectly. But I was like, yeah, I've definitely worked with people who've had like some serious shit going on, and I did not notice because I was like,
Right.
I'm trying to get through the day.
Right. You put
so
that
I'm-
mask on.
Yeah, I'm just focusing on the job to get through the day.
Yeah.
And then, in the end, you're like, what do you mean? And then someone will be like, yeah, she doesn't want to go home because her husband, beats her. And I'll be like,
Right.
what the?
Right. You
Are you
never know what
serious?
someone's going through. And so it's like, why treat the workers like you're their only fucking problem?
Yeah.
Like, I just work here, lady.
Right.
Or man, like, I'm not making these fucking rules. I'm not doing, like, don't take it out on me either.
I had, exactly what you were talking about. Again, I don't know yet, but Stifler's mom, she's the lady who wanted the massage.
Jennifer Coolidge.
Yeah, Jennifer Coolidge.
She's so good.
She is really good in this. But I was like, yeah, I've seen that where she's talking to him. She's like, yeah, I want that massage. No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't know if we can do
I
it.
can't do it today, but I can give it to you tomorrow. Well, that's not what I want. And it's just like,
Yeah. And then she goes into the massage place and is like, I was just wondering if you had any spots open up for that massage. No, nothing's changed. I don't know what to do. Oh, and then she just doesn't leave until
right. And then we always bend in the beginning. We're kind of like, okay, I'll stay late or do this. And it's just like, I shouldn't have to do that.
yeah.
Like, you should be empathetic enough to be like, okay, you said you have no time. So whatever time you can give me, I'll either take it or I won't.
Yeah.
But you think because you're a guest.
That you just expect them.
Well, just like the guy, the fucking husband.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the pineapple room. Well, you have this nice one. You have your own pool. But it's not the Really, dude? Like,
Right?
oh my god.
Be like,
It's a fucking better room for one, two. In
and you
this
got
show,
a refund.
his mama paid for it.
Yeah. Right? Oh my god.
So it was and you could see the embarrassment of the wife or fiance of just like, is this what I feel like you can really tell what type of person you're either friends with or how close you are with a friend or family, or if you even want to be friends or with someone in a partnership with how they treat service workers.
Yeah.
Because if you don't
100%.
treat them well, I will not be your friend. I will not be with you because it's almost like you're looking down on someone for servicing you, which is insane to me.
I remember before I worked in a service or industry job, I hated that, but it was based solely on the fact that I value courtesy more than like most things in people.
Right.
And if you're acting like
Courteous,
this,
yeah.
then you're being very discourteous. And if you're willing to be that discourteous to someone who is paid to be courteous to you,
Right.
then imagine how bad you would be to like just someone be like just living their lives.
Exactly.
And then after I got a job dealing with people, I was like, oh no, if you fuck with these people, I want nothing to do
Exactly.
with you.
Exactly.
I had the idea of what is it? It's like the Israeli military, where every citizen has to join for like 2 years. Everyone should have to have a service industry
That's
job
how
for
I
like
feel.
2
I
years.
was literally gonna say that. Like, I know people who have never been in this service industry who are super aware of being empathetic to service workers, whether it's even just being nice or being like, oh yeah, take your time, or tipping them maybe a little more, or in general. But I also feel the same way. I feel like you should have to have a service job if you want to be served, just so you know what it's like. And I'm sure some people will be like, well, no, but no. So many of y'all are so privileged, which is a lucky thing to not have to have that job. But if you want to go out and go to the restaurants and stuff like that, or be serviced in any way, you need to know what it's like to be on the other side of the table, because it's not fucking easy.
Yeah, and it's the amount of crap that you have to deal with for so little money, and like
So little.
it's I remember whenever I was working at that gambling place, we got tips.
Yeah.
And a lot of we weren't paid like waiter wage. It was still
A little bit. Like
it was like a
minimum
little bit
wage.
above
Yeah.
minimum wage. I think it was like $10 or so an hour, which was pretty good for
Yeah.
like a college kid. And they're like, and you can get tips.
Right.
And they said if they pulled in enough money, you would get bonuses.
Nice.
And it started doing so well when I was working there that the bonuses were so much that I didn't care about the tips.
Right.
And it was also so busy that like we started having 2 persons a shift.
Mm.
And I remember like hating my first year or so there because there was only ever 1 person on a shift dealing
Yeah.
with a room full of angry gambling addicts.
Yeah, exactly.
And you had to
It's not good.
you had to give them snacks, drinks, feed them sometimes, manage the registers,
Oh.
like
Everything.
be a host.
Be everything.
And that is so many jobs. You see that in the show where like Armand is this like incredibly expensive resort manager, and
Yeah.
he's still working the dining hall, working the front desk,
Right.
doing all this stuff. And that's what companies want you to do.
Yeah, they want you to be everything and pay you for just one thing.
Yeah. Like you can do everything right, and you're just like a part-time waiter, right? Right?
Right?
Wink.
And it even shows it, I think, a good perspective of not only like the adults who are privileged and have a lot of money, but how that rubs off on their kids.
Yeah.
And we see it with the couple's kid
Yeah,
and her friend, and how just like privileged and rude and mean they are
I gotta say,
to everyone, even their like own brother. And it's just like, oh, like you're just creating another you
and it's so.
that's gonna go in the world and be like, ugh, another one.
I gotta say, I did not expect to go into this movie and see Steve Zahn's dick
I know,
and
it's-
balls. I did
That
not.
shit was so funny.
I was like, they show you that. They show you his genitals before they show you it's Steve Zahn. And I was like, oh, I didn't know. I didn't need to see that. Give me a no-name guy. But I did. So I had a question, because you talked about it before,
hmm
about how the guy, Alexander Daddario's husband, they get married, they're on a honeymoon, and their room gets messed up.
Yeah.
So he calls his mom to complain because she paid for the room. Have you ever had something like that happen, where someone is
Yeah.
complaining in regards to someone else?
The only time that's happened is like for some dumbass reason, people like when I worked at like a Supercuts, was people would send their teenagers in there, give them like a $20 bill and be like, go get your hair cut. You know, you cut their hair how they want. I'm asking, a 14-year-old who probably doesn't have the best communication skills anyway on what he wants. And then the mom comes back and is like, it doesn't even look like you cut his hair. What did I even pay for? And I was like, well, 1, you weren't here. And 2, he told me he just wanted it trimmed. I asked him how much. He said just a little bit. We figured out what a little bit was to him, and I shaped it up. Well, I wanted it like really short, and I'm like, well, then you should have came in and said that.
Yeah.
And, of course it's like, okay, I'll cut it that short now, but it's like, don't give this runaround of trying to give your kids some independence and then just like snatch it away when they actually get what they want. And 2, you're paying for like a $12 haircut, so you can go fuck yourself. I don't really care. On top of like, yes, I just did like a $12 haircut, what your kid wanted, and he didn't even tip. So it's like, you're not even enforcing in your kid, like, hey, you did get service. Did you like it? If you did, you're kind of supposed to, at least give whatever. Which of honestly, 20% of $12 was literally like $1 or $2. So it was like.
Do you think some parents, they do that kind of thing because they know their kid doesn't know you're supposed to tip, and they believe they're like, oh, I can save some money if I just send him in, then they don't know you have to tip, and then they won't expect a tip because it's from a little kid.
Yeah, we definitely, like, if someone young came in without their parents, I definitely knew I just probably wasn't getting a tip. But it was also in this sense of, I don't think the parent would have tipped anyway. Because we did have kids that would just be like, keep the change. My mom told you to keep the change. So I could see the people that instilled that independence in their kids to be like,
Yeah.
hey, this is what you do, you know, XYZ. And then there were just some that were just literally teaching their kids to be exactly like them. Even though it was honestly, to me, embarrassing that you would come back. Like, did you not talk with your kid to say, how are you going to tell them you want your haircut? In case you didn't want your kid to have just a trim or whatever the fuck you know, like I'm sure it's many things, but I think most of them were just trying to force being independent without teaching.
Yeah, without fully having the conversation
Yeah.
of this is what this experience is going to be like.
Right.
You need to be prepared to do
Right,
it.
and this is what you say you want. Are you sure you want that? So that's like really the only thing. There were a few times where these were probably worse because I don't ever like put anything on a kid. I blame their parents. The worst is when a wife or a girlfriend would bring in their partner and be like, this is how he wants his haircut. Or like I would ask him and be like, hey, how do you want your haircut today? Do you have any ideas? You want any advice? And he wouldn't answer, they would. And I would just be like, okay, this is like a 30-year-old man. I'm not fucking asking you, lady. I'm asking him.
Yeah.
So it's also this uncomfortable
Like
scenario.
in between where
And you're just like, well, I want to do what he wants, but he's not even speaking up for himself. And then she's just like helicoptering over. And once I got comfortable to a point, I would just kind of be like, well, you can go sit down and I'm going to talk to him because it's his hair. And sometimes I'd be like, well, I don't like that. And I'm just like, okay, well, he said it was fine. So he's a grown-ass man.
It's his hair and he's the one paying
Exactly.
me. So
like, I don't care about your opinion.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to be rude about it and hover over me like, well, you going to do this and this? I'm not done, lady. Again, this is when I worked at Supercut. So I'm also like, why are you coming here expecting like the best service and haircut ever? I'm taught to do a 15-minute haircut, lady. Do you think that's going to be good?
Right?
In general? But yeah, that's probably the only experience I've really had like that. It was mainly just like angry moms who aren't really teaching their kids and then just overly protective, I guess. Like, no, protective's not the word. Controlling is the word. Overly controlling partners, which were usually women.
I definitely don't have I didn't have much of those experiences at Lucky's, but at Chipotle that happened all the time where they would send in like some little kid who was getting food for like the whole family, and I would always get so frustrated, mainly because my dad did that to me as a kid. And I'd be like, I know what's going through this kid's head. He doesn't know what the fuck is going on, has no idea what's happening, and you want him to do,
all of these things.
Yeah, they'll come in with like a piece of paper or their phone, and they're trying to like list
Order
this
and
complex thing, and I'm looking out, and there's just some lady sitting in the car, on their phone, and I'm just go, and then you make it. And then like 20 minutes later, I get a call. And they're like, I sent my son in there, and you guys messed up this, this, and this. And then I'd have to be like, well, there might have been some miscommunication with, they were logged around on their phone. They seemed confused. I tried to like.
You're a kid, shit happens.
I tried to work them through them. And then I remember I got a lot more. It was a lot harder to deal with whenever I was lower on the ladder.
For sure.
Because once you go up, I find, a lot of people I knew were still like, they still seemed like scared of the customer.
Well, that and I think you're taught, for some reason, someone made this rule that customers are always right. And some managers, sadly, do have that perspective to where they rather be like, well, it's a customer, either give them free money or, enabling their behavior instead of like protecting your worker, which is, I think, how it should be. Like, hey, we can work this out, but there's going to be some respect happening.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I will quit this fucking job. You got me fucked up.
I remember having, whenever I became a manager, and especially after I became like comfortable in that position,
where
I would talk to my crew and I would be like, look, if you are right, I will go to bat for you until I
Right.
get fired.
Right.
This is a burrito job. I do not care. If you're wrong,
Right, that's different.
then you're wrong, and I'm going to have to deal, and then I'm going to have to deal with the repercussion of that, and I'm going to be more mad at you for me having to deal with
Yeah.
something, but that's going to be it. And then I would love getting into fights with customers.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie, I got to a point too, being comfortable in my position as a job, even just being like a better like barber or stylist, that I was just like, yeah, I want someone to try me.
Yeah.
Like, I have the fucking power.
I have had that happen, and it's one of my proudest moments of working there.
Yeah.
And I always told myself I was going to do this, and then there was just this perfect, like, late 40s Karen cut white lady who was screaming at my staff, and it was late at night, and I was working the night shift, and part of working that shift is you have to like go in the back and then take care of like a bunch of the paperwork
Sure.
of inventorying all the stuff that's really expensive and whatnot. And I'm like, hey, and then that's always the hard part is I have to leave everything, and then I have to go back there for like a solid 45,
Right.
and I'll be back. And all I hear is screaming, and I look up, and on the cameras there's just this lady like halfway over the counter, like, and there's some high school
Right.
teenage girl that we have working there who's like
Right, what the fuck
literally-
am I gonna do?
right, like holding back tears.
Yeah, I'm being berated.
Yeah, and then I came out and I was like, what is going on here? And then I was what's her name? And he was Finn. It was this girl Finn, and she was like, if I remember correctly, she was like, she wanted a margarita, and I broke the bottle, and I don't know where we keep it. And I was like, oh. And I was like, go to the back, go hang out in the office. I'll talk to you about it later.
Was this at Lucky's?
No, this was at Chipotle.
They sell margaritas?
They used to. Yeah, they used to.
That's crazy.
They were actually pretty good, especially when I made them. I was real good at making a Chipotle
That's
margarita.
wild.
Because they had all the ingredients, you know. They had
I mean,
salt.
I know it's not much, but I didn't even know they ever
Yeah,
did that.
we had to go to the liquor store, and we would get tequila, triple sec, and then everything else we already had in store for other recipes. So they stopped halfway through, but we were not supposed to, but I kept the liquor and all of the stuff. Because my manager, the GM was like, I don't care, just take it. We're supposed to dump it out, but just take it. And I was like, okay, cool, free tequila.
Mm.
But the lady was like freaking out, and she was like, and then my orders, and I was like, ma'am, okay.
Yeah.
And I went, I'm sorry that happened. None we can do. And she was like, what do you mean there's nothing you can do? I was like, well, believe it or not, we don't sell a lot of these margaritas, so we don't keep a lot of liquor in stock. We
Right.
get it as we need it because the liquor store was down the street. So
Right.
if we ever needed beer or liquor, it was the one we were partnering with was down the street.
Well, and in general, I don't know why people think acting like that will get them
Right.
anything, like, at all.
Right? Like
Period.
you think that you're intimidating me, or
Yeah.
you're gonna like, oh, and then, but so she starts trying to get into it with me, and I'm just sitting there smiling, and I'm
Right.
like, what do you want me
There's
to
nothing I can do.
what do you want me to do? I can give you a cup of triple sec,
Right.
and then, and it's like there's nothing I can do for you. And then she's like, oh, like, I want to talk to your manager.
Hi.
And I went, okay. And I took a step back, and I did a full spin around, and I went, hi, how's it going? I'm Ted. I heard you wanted to talk to a manager today. And then she just went, oh, and
Oh, God.
went out, and I died laughing. I was like, when I told my boss about it, she went, if they look at the camera, you're going to get in trouble. And I was like, I better, because I was over that table laughing. I'm surprised my hand didn't go in the guacamole with how much I was flailing around in joy.
The people, again, I feel like people really only act like that, one, I'm very empathetic to the fact that I think most adults don't know how to regulate their own emotions. So they're almost
Yeah.
like kids in adult bodies. But also, again, we've made up this fake rule that the customer's right no matter what for money at the expense of like experience and mental health of the worker. And so again, I'm not gonna go anywhere with what you're wanting if you're speaking to me that way.
Yeah, it's
Like you're not gonna get anywhere ever. Period.
like what you think yelling at.
You think screaming at me is gonna be like, "Oh, okay, I'll help you." Like,
I guess I'm going to
no.
do like no.
I'm gonna be like, I don't know what your problem is. I just work here. I get paid like $7 an hour, and I think you can just go fuck off.
I would usually go. I don't know. I would have fun with them.
Mm.
At first, I would just do the, if someone was yelling at me about something that I did, I would be like, "Is everything okay?"
No, that's a good way to like break someone
be like,
acting out.
What? And be like, "Well, you seem like I already offered to remake this for you, but if you're still going really hard, so I'm guessing there's something like else going on."
No, yeah, that's what they say to do with people
is
like
there
that.
Like,
Like, are you okay?
Do you need help?
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Oh," and that
Exactly.
was,
Like, I don't know why you feel so comfortable to act like this, but are you okay?
I would be like, "Is someone?" I'd be like, "Is someone here
Right, do you
trying to
need
get my
help?
attention?"
Yeah,
Dude,
because
are
it
you
worked.
trying? Be like, "I can help you," and they'd be like, "Get the fuck."
Exactly, they snap out of their fucking tantrum.
Yeah, and
Ooh.
but it's just like Daddario's husband. That the whole show is just him, like
Not
he's
letting it go.
like a child, literally like hitting the
Throwing.
table, throwing these fits, keeps
Mhm.
going off, and he's like,
For what?
he's.
You rather ruin this whole experience for that? That's ridiculous.
I love how later in the show he gets what he wants. He like gets the pineapple room.
Yeah.
They go in. He's like, "Wow, there's a lot of pineapple stuff everywhere, huh?
Yep.
Pretty on the nose. I don't know about that." And they're like, and then the guy's just like, "Well,"
It's what you
and-
wanted.
and then they're like, "You can't even see the ocean from here." And then he's like, "Well, you." And then the manager Armand's like, "You kind of can if you turn that way, but
That's why we offered you the other nicer room.
yeah."
Again, you give these people what they want after they act like that, and it's still not good enough, which is why I'm
You're like, "Oh, it's never
here
good enough."
for, yeah, it's never good enough, so I'm not gonna let you act like that.
Which, I understood from working in, like, there's a certain level of shit that you're just going to have to
Always.
grin and bear.
Definitely.
When you're in that industry,
You sign up for knowing there's gonna be some
Yeah.
fuckery that you're just gonna have to hold your tongue for and be like, you know what? Fine.
but God, they just do it so well in this. Like, later on, this is, to walk back a little bit, you were talking about how these the guest characters and how they
Mhm.
reflect on other people, like their kids and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you notice that Steve Zahn's family,
Mm-hmm.
whenever his daughter and her friend Lonnie or whatever, they lose the bag, and then
Yes.
whenever they go up to Armand, Lonnie's like, "Yeah, I think we lost my bag at the beach," and then she's immediately like combative and
Yeah.
snort. Before she has any idea what's going on, she's just like, "Yeah, where you lost the bag? Yeah, you need to find it."
Like
all
it's
this-
our problem.
Yeah,
Like it's
and-
my fault you lost your bag.
and be like, "You tell us if it shows up, okay?" And she does that the entire time.
She even does it with her friend.
Exactly.
And I'm just like, why are you friends with this bitch? And then it even goes to the part of the friend being into one of the workers there who's like a young, handsome guy from Hawaii.
God, she ruined that poor boy's life.
That's what I'm saying. She's like wanting to be with him and almost feels bad for his story, which I totally get. With like the capitalism and
Yeah.
the like what effect tourism has on like a person's home, and tells him to go steal the family's jewelry. He gets caught. And then she almost just gets to brush off it all because it's like, well, I ruined his
Yeah.
life. He's probably going to get arrested, but not my problem. but they show it in a way of like that they barely show him ever again.
Yeah.
So it's literally showing you how much is just brushed
You-
aside in her mind.
They
Out of
show-
sight, out of mind.
They show the necklace a little bit that he
Yep.
gives her, and then she dumps it off the side of the pool, and then
That's it.
that's it. And you're like,
And she gets to go continue to have fun on her resort with her shitty friend and enable that and be like, well, not my problem.
yeah, and
It's
just,
insane.
you know, that character I thought was going to come around a lot more, but maybe
Mhm.
that's because I imprinted someone like, because I had a very similar experience, you know,
Yeah.
when I went to Vietnam for the first time with
Mhm.
Sebastian and his family, where I was like, yeah, I'm just here with my friend, and
Yeah.
I don't really have a lot of control in this. I mean, they definitely had a lot higher of a sense of, I don't know, entitlement,
Mhm.
even the Lonnie character,
Yeah.
and they were all around unpleasant.
Right.
But I stand by it. The only two characters in this show that aren't complete shit or turn into complete shit is Steve Zahn's son, who
Yes.
just
'Cause he was looking for connection
Yeah.
and some type of community because he didn't have that with his own family.
it's like no one really wanted anything to do with him and his family. All he was getting was, you find out, and then didn't have any friends or anything, and he only
Yeah.
he just messed with technology, played video,
Mhm.
he plays video games,
He
and was on his
escaped
phone.
into that.
And then whenever he lost all of his shit, he was like, he actually had to engage with the resort and the Hawaii and the place. And then he had the best time.
Yeah, he found community with the people who went
The
out
kayak,
there.
yeah.
And it was like, wow, he was the only one that got something out of being there.
Yeah.
Because even the sense of like, I think the good perspective of when Jennifer Coolidge is almost giving empty promises to the masseuse, like you're so like bloating you up. That feels good when like clients are like in love with you and your service and
You
your
ever had that
passion.
happen?
I've had people offer me, like, I've had some clients kind of be like, hey, I know you've always wanted to kind of like open your own shop. If you ever kind of want to like have someone to kind of like, what is that word?
Invest.
Invest in you, or like if you did like, I've always wanted, not me, them being like, oh, I've always wanted like a cigar shop or a coffee shop, and if you wanted to like combine the two and have like a half this, half that, like I would be interested in that. Which I think is nice. But again, a lot of it's empty promises.
Yeah.
And I've never had the experience of as far as it went with in the show where she really thought like,
It was
yo,
going to
we're gonna
happen.
like take us out of this. And then again, Jennifer was just like, did it happen? Found a man. Again, you got this woman's hopes up and then like discarded her like it was nothing.
I thought that the only thing that wasn't true to form was that Jennifer Coolidge gives her the envelope of cash in the end and was like, I just wanted you to have this and say
Yeah.
sorry. And I was like, that wouldn't have happened. That's the only thing here that I'm like, no, she wouldn't have given shit.
Yeah. I don't think in the sense of she just would have gave her a wad of cash. Maybe only in the sense of like, I have clients, and I'm sure people do that, like, each service you get, they overtly tip you
Yeah.
in that sense. But yeah, a big wad of cash seemed a little like, you'd have to be real fucking lucky, you know?
Yeah.
And even then, but yeah, that parallel too is something that someone who's super privileged wouldn't see what that would do to someone's mindset of like, wow, you really believe in me, you're gonna kind of help me, and then you just say, oh, never mind, like it was nothing, you know?
I had something kind of pseudo similar happen. It wasn't as intense as that of opening up a business, but
Right.
it was when I was working at Lucky's, and they bought out the second side of it because it was like a 4 business complex, and the one next door went out, so they bought it because they were doing so well, but they still they weren't allowing 2 people onto a shift yet. So this guy saw me working and was like, hey, I'm thinking about starting these up and I need a manager. You seem to really be, this is how much I'd pay. And I remember getting really inflated, and I was like, oh, really? You think? And he'd be like, yeah, here's my number. We'll talk about it.
Right.
You know, and I remember like we talked on the phone, and I was like, this is how much money I was going to make. And I remember thinking like, I'm going to be making so much money, and I already know how to do all this, and I can actually hire blah, blah, blah. And then And then like nothing really happened, and then like
confirms it.
and then like 6 months later he came in, and I was like, "Hey, whatever happened to the business?" I decided I didn't do it, invested my money into somewhere else, and or whatever, or no, or he was like, "Yeah, I decided to open it in Austin, and I figured since you lived here, you didn't really want the job anyway." And I was like, "Fuck you,
Yeah.
fuck you."
But again, it's like the total disregard and not
Yeah,
even thought of you. You know what I'm saying?
of
Or
being like, "Hey,
yeah.
this is and it's and at the end of the day, it's like you wish you could have that kind of faith in people and
Definitely.
connect
And
on.
I'm sure there are the 1%ers that have gotten up in that way.
Yeah.
You know?
But for the most part, it's like, don't trust nothing till it happens.
It's all empty promises.
Yeah, and it's a lot of times they just want a better experience or service, and that's how they've learned to do it, and
Right.
it can be effective. And it's like, that's why I thought, oh, she gave her this wad of cash. It almost like it walks it back too far, because I could see this person holding money to manipulate.
Right.
Because she even admits that that's what she does.
Yeah.
And then coming back and being like, "You were so great. Sorry, bye." I mean, like, oh, she just did all that to manipulate to get this like better connective experience.
That's true. I didn't think of it like that. That's a good perspective for sure. Like, if I give you these promises or money, you'll go above and beyond for me, but in the end, I'm still gonna kind of like discard you.
Yeah, which she totally does. She takes her calls. She puts
Yep.
off her appointments. She even like skips work to like, because she's like, oh, this is my
She
future.
wants, yeah,
And
for nothing.
then it's just,
Yeah, tells her kid about it, and it's like, oh my god, we're gonna be okay.
her kids like, jump however much that rich white lady says.
Yeah.
Again, back to the top. Don't trust white ladies.
But again, it's an overall great perspective, and I think when we kind of like really see the turmoil of like the characters, and you're like, oh fuck, who's gonna die?
Yeah, I thought for the whole time, I was like, don't kill Alexandra Daddario, because she was the kid, I think, is like the only good character. She is pretty good, but
she's aware, but she succumbs to her demise of like, but I'm gonna deal with this because maybe it's easy, maybe I do just want to be taken care of, and I'll just take the slack for it, which a lot of, I think, women do.
Yeah, I remember because I had this,
you settle.
And she talks about that, how she didn't realize the kind of person she was, and the kind of person he was, and the kind of society that she was in, because like she's like, yeah, I grew up playing with princess dolls, and I always dreamed of my wedding, and you were handsome and charming.
And that's what she got.
And then
the personality was in there.
And it's like she realizes who this person is, and
has a moment where she's like, maybe I won't deal with this.
Yeah, and tells
him, and he's just like,
yeah, and he's like, and he threatens her, and he's like, you better be damn sure you want to go down this road.
Yeah.
Because
you're like nothing without me, pretty much.
Honestly,
little job, you don't make a lot. And it was just like, I wouldn't want to be in something like that.
Yeah, I would. I was trying to think of it, to empathize to her perspective, and I was like, they don't really go into how much money this person has, because I think that would have helped, because at any instance I would have been like, no, you get out, lady.
I think it's trying to show you that no matter how much money it is, those people just have an abundant amount past what regular people have.
Yeah. And to me it was like Daddario was like, her whole conflict was after she realized who she married and what she married into. She was like, do I stay and try to still live my life?
Mm-hmm.
Or, like you said, do I realize I want to be taken care of, and do I want to be protective? And I thought, if you were in the position where, like, if I found some lady who, was gorgeous and seemed really nice, and then we ended up getting together, and then I found out she was terrible, but it was really like, hey, yeah, I have, a good, $700 million.
Right, you'll never have to worry about money, but you'll have to deal with.
Yeah, and it's like, What do you decide? I suck most of the time, but and it,
Unless I'm getting like half your fucking, I didn't have to sign a prenup deal.
yeah, that's
But even then, I think in general, I would never be with somebody like that.
I just
I don't care how much money you got.
I want to say I wouldn't,
Yeah, but you never know.
but I don't know. And that's the thing is like I wish I had a little more context into that
Yeah.
relationship to be like, because to me looking in, you're like, no, you're right. This is 100% a mistake and wrong. Get out. This is so obvious. Like,
Right.
just leave. I wanted to talk a little bit about later in the show where Armand, he talks about he's 5 years sober.
Yeah.
And he's the hotel manager, and he starts because of this specific group of
Right, the stress of what he's dealing with.
he ends up, they find the bag which has these girls' drugs all in it, and he ends up succumbing. And
When he was eating that dude's ass out.
yeah,
Hilarious.
but I want to talk about that
Yeah.
later. But I wanted to ask, like, have you ever like had to take drugs or something like to get through like a specifically rough thing? Maybe not necessarily drugs, but some sort of alteration.
Some coping mechanism.
Yeah. Wink.
No, but that's, and I used to joke all the time, and it's gonna sound terrible, but it's true. When I worked at like Supercuts and Sport Clips and stuff, I used to joke with like coworkers or people I knew, like, oh, now I see why people are like alcoholics, because I could get the feeling of like I had a terrible day, I dealt with terrible shitty people all day, and there were some days where you just had that all day, you know.
Yeah.
And you had some days where it was like, oh, that was fine. And those were days I got in my car and I was like, I see why someone would drive to the liquor store now and down a bottle
Yeah. And
just to be like, fuck today.
I want to feel.
I never
different.
did it because my dad's an addict, and I just see what that can do to you, and I've never had the feeling of being numb like that. But I could see why people would do it for sure, but I personally never succumbed to it.
I succumbed hard.
Yeah, I mean, I empathize enough
Yeah.
to recognize in the moment, like, fuck, I see why someone would go home and drink themselves to sleep, but I just didn't.
I didn't. When I worked at Lucky's, the biggest thing was we gave snacks to people.
Yeah.
So we had like tons of, little Debbie's and snack
Yeah.
cakes, and shit, all this
Little
stuff.
finger snacks.
Yeah, and some asshole would come through, and I would get so pissed off, and then I'm just like, there's nothing you do, and I'm just like hammering Twinkies,
Right.
or like shoving Swiss
Food,
rolls down my
yeah.
throat. And I have pictures of then, and that is the fattest I've ever been and the worst I've ever been.
Yeah.
And then like when I worked at Chipotle, I started smoking again. I quit smoking whenever I was like,
You're talking cigs?
yeah.
Okay.
I quit smoking when I was like 20 years old. I used to smoke, dip, and chew.
Ooh.
For
Which is just so crazy because I've only known Ted for like a year-ish. And like, again, just hearing your stories, I'm just like, holy fuck, I can't even imagine that guy.
Yeah,
you know?
I used to be a much different person. But I smoked, dip, and chew, and Alex, my brother, he found out and asked me to stop. And when I worked at Chipotle, I remember telling him, and I was like, look, I'm dieting. I can't fall into food. I don't drink that much anymore.
Right.
I was like, I need something. So I'm going to start smoking again.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't want you to, but I get it.
Right,
and I was
right,
like, okay. So I started smoking, and that was like, it was literally like, oh, I would be like, ah.
Yeah. And you're fine.
Let's go in there and do it again.
Yeah,
and
for sure. I mean, I definitely even worked with women or men too, I worked with that had those issues. Like, I could tell they were an alcoholic. I could tell they maybe acted out with sex or drugs on the weekend. And I could see the patterns it was creating. And I think I never realized, being a hairstylist, the kind of like toxic community it is, just in the sense of we we can do and get away with a lot because
Sorry.
you're good.
I didn't want to expect that to be as loud as it was.
Because in the idea of like, yes, if I worked at Supercuts or Sport Clips or for someone, you're still like never drug tested.
Yeah.
You're still never like held to that kind of standard like an office job.
Yeah.
But it gets worse when you don't work for a corporate place. So I've worked with women that have either worked for themselves or they work at a private business like I did for so many years. And I could see their demise and fall, and some of them left those places because, you know, I worked with one girl that I learned real quick. After about lunchtime, I wouldn't even try to talk to her because she was just so fucking cranky. And I was just like, what the fuck is your deal? Like, I should be walking around eggshells around you, like. And I think clients even started to notice. They're like, oh, if I'm not getting my hair cut with her in the morning, it's not that great of an experience. And then I find out, yeah, she's like doing drugs in the morning, and her come down is about a couple hours later, where I'm like, oh, that's why you're so pissy. But again, she ended up being fired, and then she went and did her own thing. And then it was like, I heard through the grapevine of clients that came back to the shop after following her, oh, she would just cancel on me all the time. Oh, I'd show up to her own, you know, like how I have my own suite, hers, and she wouldn't even be there. So you could see that even working for herself, that wasn't gonna work. Like, that lifestyle takes it all down with you, you know? And so in my industry, there's a lot of like alcoholism or a lot of drug abuse or partying because you are kind of on your own schedule.
Yeah. I know I didn't, so I don't have much to talk about it for like the coworkers with Lucky's.
For sure, yeah.
But at Chipotle, I remember, you might be surprised at this, but they don't drug test there. And
wow.
I remember that was part of the interview where people were like, do you drug test? And I would go, no, this is a restaurant job. We don't drug test. And I remember like some people, people would like come in and complain about someone, you know, like the quiet complainy, ladies, and they'll be like, excuse me, excuse me, do you know that man? Are you aware that man was a felon? And I'll be like, yeah, felons are the best workers we can get. Like, honestly, and I've told that to people, and it's 100, in my experience, it's 100% true. The best people I've ever hired were convicted felons.
Yeah, because they're needing that job.
Yeah, but not even just like needing, but a lot of them, like, if you're working that hard and like a lot of them like genuinely wanted to turn their lives around and stuff. Like, that's
what I'm saying. They weren't just maybe like the high schoolers who their parents told them to get a job, and they're like, I guess I'm here.
But they're like, this is a path for me to be able to like
get out of that. Yeah.
And I'm not gonna say his name, but there was this one guy who I hired, and he was so energetic, and he was so great, and he was a little wacky, but he seemed like so
his personality. Yeah.
He was so active and energetic and stuff. And then I found out he was like, hey, just so you know, if something gonna pop on my background check, but I want you to know I put that behind me. So anything you see is behind me. And I was like, we don't background check. And then he was like, oh, for real? That's great, man. I didn't want people to know about that stuff. And I was like, don't worry, dude, it's cool. And then later, after he worked there, I was like, hey, man, because he kept saying like, man, in prison. And I'd be like, hey, man, you don't have to tell me, but like, were you like, did you like get in trouble for something, or were you like a real bad guy? And he was like, I killed people. And I went, haha. He was like, I'm not playing with you, Mr. Ted.
Mr. Ted
sold drugs. And he was like, I was a gangbanger, man. For real. And he was like, I'm not proud of it. But, I was on drugs, and the people I was working for, they kept me on those drugs.
Right.
And I realize now that when I killed those people, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because that's what they made me think I had to do.
Yeah.
And now I don't do that no more. I don't do no drugs, and I don't kill no people no more. And I was like, okay, name redacted. Okay. Don't ever say that to anyone ever again. And he was like,
Noted.
That's a good idea. And I love that
my
guy.
God. Yeah.
He was awesome. And, you know, like,
But again, you never know someone's gone through or been through, and that's why you should treat people with just respect, period. Or give them some grace when needed.
right? Like, because, and not even just in the sense of, I think, which I gotta say, you know, this is a personal, this is an aside, and it's a gripe. I fucking hate, because they did it in Chipotle, and they started doing it at Lucky's before the place got shut down and raided by the cops. When you start calling customers guests who are in a non-guest customer place,
Fact.
it fucking infuriates me. And it's like, you want me to call this person who's in this building, or at your request, a maximum of a minute and a half, because you want them through this line.
Yeah, you think they're gonna have the best guest experience?
Right?
Get the fuck out of here.
Like, you want this person who's going to be here for, according to you, in my face talking to me for 10 to 15 seconds is how fast you want this person to interact with me. You want me to call them a guest, and they are a guest in this establishment? Shut the fuck up.
Exactly. No.
Like, no, they're a customer who's buying a fucking burrito. You know?
Exactly. Get the fuck out. Actually, just order online, pick it up, and I don't even want to talk to you.
Right? Like, you know. Anyway,
I think that's the hard part about my industry, is because it's not that quick of an interaction.
Yeah.
So you're really having kind of like the experience of the show. Like, yes, they were there for a week. Mine's not that long, but it feels like that, you know? And yeah, Supercuts and Sport Clips, they tell you to do a 15-minute haircut.
Right, it's all about throughput.
Yeah, and I'm kind of just like, okay, you want me to be like a robot, but you want me to give like the best customer service, but you want me to get them in and out. But then they don't like their haircut because it's choppy, and then, like, what do you really want from me? Like, I can't do all these things, and then you expect me to come in with the greatest attitude every day.
Right.
I can't do that. Like, I can't be... Again, we're all people, too. Like, I can't put on a mask that much and it not leak through a little bit if I'm not having a good day either, or if it took the third customer being an asshole for me to finally fucking snap, and then I'm in trouble. Luckily, I've always worked for people that were pro-stylist and not pro-customer, in the sense of, like, they know what it's like to be in my position, where these corporate people are like, I don't know what it's like to cut hair, but this is how you should be acting and doing it. And I'm like, but you don't know what it's like.
I remember whenever they started hiring, like, out of company for those, like, middle regional manager positions and stuff, and where you had a lot more of those problems, where they would come in and something would happen and they'd be like, well, I should be this, and you'd be like, no, and that's not, and they'd be like, well, why can't it be like this? And be like, and then that's where you find out, like, have you never worked in this before?
Like, have you ever been on this side of the
counter?
The counter? Because,
like, have you ever held a pair of scissors? Have you ever actually, like, wrapped the burrito?
Dude, I can't wrap a fucking burrito
right
like
now
that.
that you never have, because if you did, you wouldn't be saying this shit.
Yeah.
And
I think it was almost a bad thing. Not in a bad way, but in the sense of, like, if I ever wanted another job, not in this industry, because I've gotten to a point where, like, even when I was at Supercuts for the couple years, I got to a point there that I was just like, you are not walking over me. So when clients were rude, I matched it. I matched it.
I was going to ask you that, because we see throughout the show Armand is, like, doing things to get back at
he's slipping through
this guy.
Yeah.
And is, like, you know, where he, like, schedules them on the boat ride with the
right
Coolidge, who's
with their
doing
mother's
the
ashes.
and,
That's supposed to be romantic and shit.
Which, and it eventually, like, it eventually gets him killed, because he's like,
it's like a tit for tat game.
Yeah, they keep fucking with each other to the point where
it gets too far.
Yeah.
And it's an accident in the end, but it's still taking too far.
Right. And, you know, but I was wondering, like, have you ever gone out of your way to fuck with someone like? Not, obviously
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is judged up,
No,
but
no, not really, because they're quick interactions.
really, I've done it even though it's quick.
Yeah, I
I
think
fuck with some people.
I think it's only like, again, when I'm matching them. Like, I'm still very professional in my tone, in my words. I'm just very stern with my attitude back. So I would never like really mess with them. But I definitely wanted I guess the only times I ever really wanted to mess with people is sometimes I really wanted to like fuck somebody's haircut up. But some part of me would not let me. Even though I knew other people that were like, oh, I didn't care. I didn't double check his haircut. I didn't blend it. He wanted this. That's what you fucking got. And I'm like, okay. For some reason, I can't do that. Physically, my body won't let me like leave something a little fucked up or a lot fucked up. But yeah, I think the only time it really was anything is I had this one client who I never really liked. And this was at like a high-end salon I was at. I never really liked him, but I wasn't at a point yet in my career where I just was letting go of clients because I didn't like them, because I still kind of needed the money or I didn't know how to go about firing people. And I knew he was very, like, anti-everything, which is fine. I don't mind. But, so, like, around COVID, I never made him wear a mask or anything, because, again, I don't want to, like, fight with you. I just want to cut your hair and you fucking leave. And when we didn't have to wear masks anymore, I knew when I wore a mask, it bothered him. And so when he would come in, I would put it on. Just because. One, I knew he was, during COVID, like, every weekend going to, like, private underground parties and shit. So one, I was like, I just need to wear one around you, period.
Like, he's going to Trump rallies.
Probably, but I mean, he was like a doomsday prepper guy, so he was just doing whatever the fuck he wanted.
Yep.
And and so I put my mask on. He's getting his hair cut because I knew it would bother him. And I think one day he just snapped about it. And I'm like, halfway just beginning cutting his hair. And he just goes, how stupid do you have to be to wear that mask? And I kind of was just like...
You're like, how stupid do you have to be to say something?
That's what I said. I said, how stupid do you have to be to say it to somebody cutting your hair? And he was like, well, I didn't really mean it like that. And I said, well, then how did you mean it? Because that was pretty fucking rude.
How'd you mean it?
But again, I still maintain this professionalism. Like, I'm still cutting his hair while we're going at it. And because I wanted him to really let him know, like, he didn't bother me. Where a part of me did want to be like, okay, well, you can get the fuck out now with half a haircut. But, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to fire him, like, right here. He'll get his last haircut and fuck off.
Yeah.
And we're going back and forth a little bit. And I kind of was just like, why is it bothering you so much? I said, I've never forced you to wear one in this chair. And he was like, well, you're psychologically bothering me. And I said...
Okay.
I literally was like, okay, well, then after this haircut, you can go find someone else that doesn't psychologically bother you. And he was like, what? And I said, yeah, this is your last haircut. And he was just like, well, I didn't, like, mean it to get to this. And I said, no, you just don't have any manners, and I'm not going to tolerate that. Yeah. I said, so after this...
Whatever you're
done.
Paying, it's not worth it.
You're done. And again, I just kept cutting his hair. I kept this kind of tone, and he still tried to, like, apologize. And I was just like, you don't need to. I said, you're not offending me. I said, I want someone in this chair who respects me. I said, you can think whatever you want about me. I said, but you don't say it out loud. I said, and I don't say it out loud.
Like, that's the cornerstones of a professional relationship.
And then at the very end, he was like, well, I guess thanks for all these haircuts. I said, yeah, good luck. And that was that. And man, was I fucking glad. And all the girls were like, oh, I would have stopped cutting his hair right in the middle. I said, no, you wouldn't have.
Right, like,
that's the only time I really, like,
was like,
got to that. Yeah.
No. No, I had a lot of instances where, like, you know, obviously I'm not gonna fuck with someone's food in like
Right.
the movie way of putting
Right.
shit in or
No,
something
yeah,
like
that
that.
ain't cool.
But you know, like,
Was it like you paid for double protein and I didn't give you double protein type shit?
no, I remember
Or you asked for guac, I charged you for it and I didn't give you any fucking guac?
a lot of it was like there if you've worked in a Chipotle, you're gonna know what this is. But the bitches who be getting extra beans, and
The bitches who get extra beans,
or
this is for you.
or them real saucy burritos. So
And wet burritos.
yeah, the wet burrito people. So there is a structure of a burrito and the way it works in order to actually work as a cohesive thing.
Yeah.
And now I haven't worked at Chipotle in like over a year now. But this is like always got to be a problem. And I remember getting called up because I was helping with like cooking something, and we had this girl on the line she was very sweet. She's a little ditzy, but she was very nice, and she did okay.
Yeah. She did her best.
She cried a lot. She would break
Yeah.
down quite a bit and cry, but she was like 17.
Right. Again,
And-
most people don't know how to regulate their own emotions.
Exactly. And she, you know, she's in high school and she's dealing with people and all this stuff.
She's
And, then-
trying.
and there was just this guy who was like being a dick because she couldn't convey to him that what he was asking for was unrealistic.
Okay. Which is hard to do because even when you do, they won't believe it.
Exactly.
So it's a
and they're like, I've
lose-lose.
gotten this before.
It's a
and then-
lose-lose.
Yeah. So there was this guy who wanted to get like a few grains of rice. Like literally he's like a few grains, and then double beans, double
What the fuck's the point of a few grains?
I have no idea.
What?
I have no idea. But it stuck with me of like, and then he got all the wet shit.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
like carnitas and barbacoa, they're wet.
Right.
You know, there's wet salsas, sour cream, all
right,
this stuff.
Right.
And that's what he wanted.
Wet veggies.
Yeah. That's all he wanted was like all this wet shit.
And not in a bowl, in a fucking burrito,
Yeah,
right?
in a burrito. And I remember, and I was talking to the guy, I was like, what seems to be the problem? And then this guy's a dick.
Of course.
And he's just like, this chick doesn't know how to do this, and I don't even know why she has this job when
Oh
she
my
can't even work
God.
and roll a dang burrito. And I'm like, well, what do you want? And I was like, what's the problem? And then she was like, I can't make that. And I'm like, just go sit down.
Right.
I was
Take
like,
a moment.
go in the office, sit down. And it was literally just the guy who was there.
Yeah.
And I was like, what did you want? And he says this thing, and I was like, well, for a lot of people that would be difficult to make. If you would like, I can put it in a bowl and then put it in a tortilla.
Right.
Give you like that, and you can eat it that way. And he was like, no, this
course
is how
not.
I want it. And I was like, okay. And so I take a tortilla, and I was like, well, just so you know, it's gonna be difficult too. He's like, I don't care, that's how I want it. And I was like, okay. And then so I had someone else working, and then there's a trick where they tell you to do where if like you bust a tortilla, or if it starts getting too wet, or to re-roll it. And so you have someone give you a new tortilla, and then you do it. So then I was purposely breaking his tortilla and go, oh, I need to re-roll it. And then he like got a bunch of guac and all this stuff, and then I take the tortilla out with a bunch of the shit still on the
Yeah.
tortilla, throw it in the trash, dump all the new, dump
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stuff back on there, do it. And I did it like 3 times until his thing was like only like that big, and I was like, there you go, it's done. And he was like, what? And I was like, no, it's done. Charge him.
Yeah.
And then it was like it's Chipotle, so it was like $100 burrito. It wasn't that expensive.
yeah,
but
no,
Chipotle
but
is very
damn near
expensive.
close.
And then I've had that happen, or I've had where someone is like, they wanted it in a certain order,
Oh,
and
God.
they're like, I want this topping, and
Right.
then this topping, and then this topping. And they're like, no, I said that switched. I wanted it switched. You messed it up. And I'm
I
just
don't
like,
really feel like you should get that choice.
yeah, right. It's like, it's in that way for a reason.
Exactly.
And
Make your own fucking burrito at home.
and I just go, okay. And then I just turn and I throw it in a trash can. And I'm like, let's redo it then. And they're like, well, you didn't have to do that. And I'm like,
I did. Yeah, you have
Seemed
to
like-
show them how ridiculous they're being.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Speaking of ridiculous, I had that question of what is the most ridiculous ask that someone has ever asked you for? Or not, maybe not even ridiculous ask, but like, what is a situation that you've encountered that was so ridiculous that it just like to this day baffles you? Of like,
When a guy asked me to touch his hot dog and called it a hot dog.
hot dog out there, folks. A wink.
Yeah, I had this client. I'm pretty lucky I have not had a lot of encounters with like harassment, like a lot of my coworkers in the past have had with working with men and like servicing men. But I'll never forget the craziest thing anyone's ever asked me was this guy had like no hair, so he just wanted like a buzz cut and like his beard done. But we still shampoo afterwards just because that's what the high-end salon I worked at offered. I shampoo his hair, you get like a hot towel on the face, I'm shampooing. Naturally, when you're shampooing, it almost feels like a scalp massage,
Never had either one. Not shampooing, but I've never had another person shampoo.
Right,
my
it's
hair
just,
at a place.
yeah. And I lean him up from the chair. I'm kind of just like drying off his fucking scalp, really, because he had no fucking hair. And he just goes, "Man, I wish you could touch my hot dog like that." And I just kind of laughed, and again, I've never encountered something like that, and I was just like, did you really just say that? And he just kind of laughed. And I was glad it was the end of the service, because in the middle of a service, I don't know what I would have done. I would have said like, "Okay, well, you can fucking leave." And I was just like, "Okay, well, we're done here." And we checked out, and I told my boss later that night, and she was just like, "What's his name? I'm gonna email him and fire him." Because that's never happened to me. So I was like, "What?" And this guy was probably like in his 70s. And I've told some people this story, like other men that have asked the same questions, like while I'm cutting their hair, like, "What's something crazy a guy said to you?" And some of them, when I tell them that, go, "Oh, well, what conversation were y'all having for him to say it?"
Like, well, it doesn't fucking matter.
That's what I said. And I said, "Well, that doesn't fucking matter, but if you really want to know," he was telling me how his wife was just diagnosed with cancer. So I think he was more worried about his dick not getting wet anymore because his wife was dying. And then they're just like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, don't fucking ask somebody that. It doesn't matter what she's wearing. It doesn't matter what conversation she was having. You don't say that shit to people. And yeah, and my boss fired him in a very professional email. And he responded with leaving a Google review saying how we were all a whole bunch of fucking snowflakes at the salon who only catered to gay men because they can't handle men coming in there. And she was just like, "What should we do? Should we like kind of like dispute this review?" I said, "No. You should leave that up because someone's gonna see how fucking crazy this guy is."
Right?
And then his wife emails the shop and goes, "Why is my husband not allowed back there?" And I'm someone personally that if you've lived in a city for a long time and you're that old, I would think you would have a stylist already that you've been going to forever, So in my head, I was kind of thinking, I only cut his hair and beard like maybe 2 or 3 times before he said this. And so my personal opinion was, this is why he was in his 70s still trying to find somebody, because he clearly keeps crossing this boundary. And so his wife gets involved. And my boss was just kind of like, "Well, I don't really think it's necessary to explain it all, but if you really want to know, your husband said something very sexually inappropriate to my stylist, and this is what it was." And her response was, "Oh, he refers to his back of his head rolls as his hot dog, so that's probably what he meant, because I'm a masseuse, and he knows that that's not what you ask." Bitch, it's not my fault you're in denial, but that's what he fucking said.
Damn.
And I know what he meant it as. And I was just like, this is so wild. But if you'd asked my coworkers those questions, I've had my coworkers men try to lift up their skirt. I've had, while they're shampooing them, they like grab their boobs. They've like texted them like dick pics after a hair. Like insane shit. And so I feel very lucky that I either one, give off the vibe of don't fucking try it, or two, just like I establish boundaries much more firmer. I don't know, but I feel very lucky that I have not had encounters like that as much as people I've worked with have, because oh my god.
I'm not a woman.
Right.
And I gotta tell you, I didn't know very much. Like, I didn't have a mom growing up, and my Nana, she passed away whenever I was very young. But I didn't have a lot of experience, like, with women in general. But whenever I became older, and I started having friends who were women, and I started dating, I'd be like, they would make, I would hear, like, jokes and stuff like that, and they'd be like, that's not real, right? And they'd be like...
Or it's not all men. It's like, but it is.
And they'd be like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
And then that's when I learned that, there are a lot of dudes out there that are
real
fucking crazy. And there's unfortunately, most women, I never understood why a lot of, there's this like perception that a lot of women they just live scared.
Yeah, we do.
And I was like, in my head before, I was like, why would you have to do that? That's crazy, whatever. Right. And I remember I had this, it was like right after college. I knew this girl, her name was Kayla, and she was like, you don't understand. And I was like, no, I don't.
Right.
What does it mean?
Yeah. And
I've had this, since then told to me through like pretty much almost all the women I've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, you are a over 6 foot tall, giant white man.
Yeah.
At no point is anyone, like, unless there's something, they're already crazy, no one's going to mess with you.
Right, unless it's just a violent situation.
Yeah.
You're not being threatened.
Exactly.
Or you're not feeling threatened.
Whereas everyone you see as a woman is a potential predator for any game. It doesn't matter whatever it is.
Verbally, physically, emotionally, it doesn't matter.
It's just
what it is.
Someone is out there looking to prey on.
Yeah, and I've had conversations like that with men where they're just, because I will always say like, well, it's all men. And I feel like some people might get offended by that, but if you don't fit that mold, then I don't think you should be offended, And I've told people like a conversation I've had with someone where I've said like, well, like all men, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, I don't do that. And I was like, okay, but again, like, hey, I just invited you over to my house as a single woman, you're a man. I was taking that risk because when you do know, it's too late.
Yeah.
And then it like clicked like a light bulb and they were like, oh. So yes, it's all men until proven otherwise, but I don't know until then, so I'm gonna say it's everyone.
I remember.
And I feel like most men also aren't going out of their way to do things to make women feel safer. So, so it's like, what are we supposed to do? We're just gonna protect ourselves by putting that filter over everyone until proven otherwise. Whether it's too late of something bad or it's like, okay, they are a decent person.
Yeah. Which, like, I remember the first time I had hands-on experience was I have a friend, well, I haven't talked to her in a long time. I used to know this person. Her name was an old friend whose name was Angel, and she was partially deaf. She was very beautiful, and we would go out to, she loved going to clubs, and we would go out to clubs, and she would do this thing where I thought that it happened with me, but I guess a lot of other guys that I know of who went out to clubs with her have provided this service where if some guy is like talking to her, she will fully sign and use it as like an out to get away. And then I went out to the club with her, and then I'm talking to her, And then this drunk guy comes up, starts talking to her, and then she just starts
Signing.
to me. So I, I'm pretty quick to pick up. I start signing at her, and then I go to the guy and I'm like, oh, she's deaf. And then he's like, well, could you tell her that she's very beautiful and I would love to dance with her? And I'm like, all right. And then she just goes, and in my head, like up until that point, I'm like, oh, that's enough,
Right, he'll fuck off.
That's it, it's I've been yelled at since I was a kid of like, no means no.
Right.
When you get whistled, that's what you do. And
Not everyone else
I was
that
extremely
way.
religious too growing up, which also further
Yeah.
really hammered in those values. And also, I'm not a fucking menace. And then this guy wouldn't leave, and then his friends show up, and then it literally turns into like there's like a bunch of dudes we're sitting at a wall table where it's like it's one of those tiny circle tables, two stools,
back into a corner
and I'm
almost.
literally like, and they're like, just what? And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And we leave, and I was like, is that what you have to fucking deal with?
Yeah. So imagine if you weren't there.
Right? I'm
how
like,
aggressive that gets.
I was like, I had to be a bodyguard for like 20 minutes. Are you fucking kidding me? And then she was like, yeah, that happens. And
there's been plenty of times it's almost the scary sense of like, I've walked through a mall before, and guys like, oh damn girl, you're fine, and you kind of don't say anything, or if they're trying to like get your number or something, you're like, oh no thanks, you're still trying to be polite just to not escalate anything. And that instant no of rejection for them, it was like, fuck you, stupid fucking bitch. And it's just like, oh, and then you feel even more unsafe walking away, your back towards them, and you're like, fuck,
Yeah, and you're like, oh, if that's all it takes,
is that all it takes for me to say no to you? And you're ready to be like, fuck you, you stupid bitch. Like, I'm scared. Which is why I'm sure some guys maybe assume women are flirting with them because they're being nice, but most of the time it's because we just don't want you to get violent or like escalate the situation to not being uncomfortable or unsafe anymore.
That's what I always believe, to the point where, unfortunately,
When
I
people-
don't know that a girl is hitting on me until later when my friend goes, why didn't you talk to them? They're hitting me. Like, no, they weren't. They were being nice. I'm like, why would they have to be nice? They're just some random person. And be like, because I was there and they're obviously a nice person. Duh. You're being ridiculous. Who would hit them?
Right. No, I mean, it's definitely...
But...
in the service industry, that's what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Period.
Speaking of that, I wanted to bring it back a bit, where there's a scene where I imagine if you had had this experience, you'd talk about it, but I want to talk about it. Have you ever heard of or had the experience of Armand, who like falls completely off the deep end? He goes like full kind of bad.
Yeah.
Where like there's
he's back to his addict ways.
Yeah, he's drunk, and there's this guy who works for, he's one of like the bellboys or something like that, or I think he works for him.
Yeah.
And
he's
then
he's
his coworker,
Yeah.
one of his subordinates, and he's like hitting on him, and it gets more and more uncomfortable until he's finally like, I want to have sex with you. I don't care what I have to do. You can have tomorrow off. You can pick your shifts. You can do whatever you want. But here's drugs. Let's bang.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah.
Have you ever had that happen, or know of it happen?
No. Luckily, I feel like all my bosses have been women. And again, I've been pretty lucky to... Hey! I've been pretty lucky that a client has never pushed it farther than that, or... if I did get comfortable with a client or befriend them, that they use that friendship as now their way to try to like... Luckily, that's never happened to me, but I'd love to hear.
Wow, that's crazy, because I fucking have. And it was insane. So, I had this coworker.
Yeah.
And it was, she, I thought you mentioned like, oh, I've only worked for women. She,
Yeah, like...
and I gotta tell you, this story I'm about to tell happened with two different the general manager and this other manager with different people.
They clearly had a power kink or something.
One of them, yes. The other one, no. But I'll get into that. So we didn't find this out until like kind of later. But so there was this one girl who she was a buddy of mine until this went down, and I was like, okay,
never mind.
Where she worked there a long time, I think like a similar amount of time as me, and she wanted to start coming up because like she like wanted to get married, and I think she was engaged and all this stuff, and blah blah blah, whatever. So I had already been a manager for a while. Then she wanted to become a manager. She asked me for like help, so I was showing her all the stuff she needed to do, or, blah blah blah, and she takes a test. She gets promoted. When she starts working the shifts herself, it's if again, for anyone out there who hasn't worked service industry or hasn't worked like in a restaurant, you do not, I'm guessing either you've only been told or you flat out do not understand the level of work it takes to run, open, and close those kinds of establishments.
Right. You don't just get a clock out and leave.
Yeah, it is a like race against time, because you don't have time. Like you will get fired if you take too much time to do things. And it is a race against the clock of sweat and running your ass off to get everything they want done in a near impossible amount of time to a near impossible levels of standard.
So they set you up for failure.
Yeah, pretty much. And this girl, she wasn't really getting the hang of it.
Right.
And
time management.
Yeah. And so she was having a problem where all of her shifts were running really long, and they were paying, everyone there, and they were like, hey, we're spending so much money on everyone taking so long.
Even though we don't actually pay you guys anything, but
that was the problem. And so she goes, I need help making sure everything's done in time. Because they were like, if you can't fix this, you can't be a manager. We're going to demote you, or you're going to get fired.
Right.
So she makes a deal with someone who I won't name his name, but is now a good friend of mine, who at the time was 16, to stay late, and she would trade. She would go, hey, if you work off the clock and help me close the store, we'll have sex in the bathroom. And this went on for months.
Oh my god.
Until she was eventually caught, and they were like, hey, we noticed on the camera that this guy was, because it was like some audit, and this because they like the corporate would generally audit, and they would go, okay, how many people are on camera, how many people are clocked in, and they caught it, and this guy was out front cleaning and doing stuff, not clocked in. And then so they stay watching the cameras, and they see him go to the bathroom, and then they see her go to the bathroom. And then the guy is like, yeah, he's in high school, and he's like, I can't get any sleep, I'm not getting my work done, I need to get ready for college. But we were like, well, what's going on? We're like, I keep staying late to help this person with their shifts. And we're like, why?
Right, why would you do that?
And then it first started with going like, hey, you're not allowed to do this. And then it came out that she was sleeping with him
in exchange,
and I guess she was sleeping with other people to do this. And then this is where I learned the difference between people and like corporate people.
Yeah,
it's because when all this happened, it turned into this it turned into like a thing, and we were like, this is so fucked up.
Yeah, what
the hell's going on? And then my general manager at the time was like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And we were like, me and a few other, like the rest of the managers, and then like and then the workers were like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's not a big deal. And they were like, if we go to corporate with this, nothing's going to happen. And they were like, well, the kid wants to go to corporate. the kid was kind of molested.
Yeah, literally.
So
He was-
they were like, he's pretty much an adult. And I was like,
There's
is
no-
he that word that you're saying?
Pretty much, ain't it? That's
So they went.
so wild.
They went to corporate.
So the kid's parents got involved then, right?
Nope. So they I told him, I was like, he was like, I don't want my parents to find out because they'll think less of me. You know, that
Aw,
classic
stop,
mentality.
shame, yeah.
And he was like, and we were like, well, why'd you do it? And he was like, well, honestly, I didn't even want to do, I was just trying to help. And he was
Right.
like, I didn't really care about the other stuff, but that's what she wanted to do. And I guess and it kind of hold it over me or something. And I was like,
And I'm sure, being a 16 or whatever, how old
yeah.
teenage boy, you're gonna be like, oh shit, I mean, I guess I'm getting something out of it,
Yeah.
even if the shame is there
But
after at least the first few times.
exactly. And it's like, and he didn't want his parents to find out.
Right,
and
right,
then,
right.
But he still wanted to go to corporate because he wanted it to stop. And then
Yeah.
corporate found out. They sent some people in. They talked to everybody. And then everyone was like,
Investigate.
yeah, kind of. And then they were like, we're just going to move her to a different store. And no one's allowed to talk about this anymore.
Sounds just like what they did with all the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Oh, you molest little boys, we'll move you to a different state with a different little junction, and then you can do it there, and we'll just keep passing you around.
And
That's crazy.
yeah.
That's why I'm so like, any job with HR is not for the employees.
Yeah,
it is for the corporate.
it's for
owners,
their the corporation's well-being.
Yeah, they
That's
don't
why
give a
they're a
fuck about-
corporate funded.
Yeah, they don't give a fuck about
Outsourced.
the workers.
If you want help, you get. And then after that I started doing a thing where like I'm very cautious.
Mhm.
I've always been very like,
Aware, self-aware.
I was gonna say maybe a little what's the word? I think everyone's out to get me.
Oh, paranoid.
Yeah, I'm a little paranoid. I'm always a little paranoid.
Same.
And so like, and I worked with underage people.
Yeah.
I worked with unstable people and all this stuff. So like, if I ever had a professional conversation, we went out to the front where there was cameras, or into the office where
Right.
there's cameras. I
Right.
would record the conversation.
Right.
I would tell them, I'm going to record this conversation because we're going to have a professional conversation.
Yes.
I'd make sure they were clocked in. I'd make sure I was clocked in. I would go out of my way for all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember whenever they were like, hey, what happened? I was like, oh, it's crazy. And I was like, and at that point, they didn't really. This was later on, but that was kind of the start of me being I was not cool, which
yeah.
I was like, oh,
You're like the do right guy.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I want the crew who work under us to not feel, to like actually get paid and be safe and
Right.
have access to all of I could go into like
Sure.
that stuff, but we don't have time for that. But after that, with some of the other managers, I was not cool anymore.
Right.
And it turned into a problem, which I invite you to try to get me fired, because I'm too good. I'm too good for it. I know what you're doing, and I know how to fight it. So like, there was a good chunk there where I'm like, oh, you guys are cool with this? You guys are bad people.
Yeah.
And then they'd be like, watch your ass, because they're moved, they're gone, but we'll just fire you if you can't be cool with this kind of thing. And it was like, all right, good luck.
Do
And I'm like, I'm too good for that shit.
it.
So, and then you just be perfect, and then there's
Yeah.
nothing you could do.
They
And
can't fire you.
But when I saw that in this show, I was like, I fucking know that. I've
Yeah.
seen that shit happen. And I was
That's
like,
scary that happened. It's so common, I'm sure.
Yeah. that was the thing, is they're like, oh, this happened. And then after it happened there, like, then you start aware of this. Once you're aware of what people say when that kind of thing happens.
They really mean it when they say ignorant is bliss.
Yeah.
Because once like you said, once you're aware, you're like, oh,
it happens
fuck.
all the time. And
Yeah.
once you know what to listen for, you're like, fuck, nowhere is
Safe.
safe.
Yeah. So
You know?
imagine all that, but being a woman.
Right? And I had, if I'm being honest, which I get, this is a couch of honesty. This is a show. This is for you people. If I'm being honest, it didn't go that far, but it was something like that happened to me where she was a younger manager and I had like just started.
Younger as in underage or just younger than you?
She was younger than the other managers. So all the other managers were
I'm talking about with you.
Me, I actually don't know. I think she was younger. I don't know.
Right, but was she younger in the sense of she was underage
No,
younger?
you're
or
not
just
allowed,
younger than you?
She was not a minor, and you were
Okay.
not allowed to be a minor and a manager.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, because, anyway, so she was not a minor, but I don't know if she was younger than me. I think she was, but
Okay.
not by much. But I had like just started, and she had just become a manager. And I remember she was very sexually aggressive. And I found out later that she had like some personal issues, and whatever
hypersexual.
life and all this stuff that
led to that behavior.
Where I don't condone it, but I could empathize and understand, oh, this is why this person's that way. But I remember she got caught on camera humping me in the front and begging me to do something, and I was like, fucking no.
Please get the fuck off of me.
And then and I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
And then it turned into a thing where that should have been my first instance where I'm like,
Red
oh,
flag. Yeah.
this isn't run like I thought. All corporate businesses were run with a certain standard of behavior that if something happened they just cut.
Yeah.
This should have been my first one of being like, oh no, that's not the case. Is because whenever I was like, yo, this fucking happened and it was not fucking cool.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable.
For like so many reasons. They were like, the general manager was like, said, oh, well, we can do something about it, but she's probably gonna get fired. And I'm like, yeah, she should get fired, obviously. And they're like, well, would you talk to her first, and then if you want to go forward.
And I don't
So
like
then-
that they put it on you.
Exactly.
Like, managers always are like, well, you guys should handle it together. I'm like, then what the fuck are you a manager for?
Yeah, right.
Like, you're supposed to be that, what is it called?
That mediator.
The mediator,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, because if I go do it, I'm not going to be fucking nice about it. That's the whole point. I'm coming to you.
That was my go-to. Is I'd be like, hey, I would tell my boss, be like, hey, I'm gonna lose this managed time because
Yeah.
I need to deal with these two employees' problem, and they're gonna have to both be on the clock for it. And they're like, and she'd be like, why? Like, well, because it's a work-related issue. We're gonna have a work-related discussion, and otherwise, I'm going to have to fire one of them.
Yeah.
So either we're gonna deal with it at work time, or I'm gonna fire someone, and you're gonna need to hire and cover these
Yeah.
shifts. And she'd be like, I guess. And
Mhm.
then you sit them both down with a pen and pad and go, what's your problem? What's your problem?
Right.
You guys make burritos, maybe chill out.
Plus,
least that
you
was most
could
of
be
my
that third person of, it's not going to be a he said, she said anymore
Yeah.
if I just go talk to her and then she says, oh my god, they did this. And I'm like, no, the fuck I didn't. You know, like, you need
Yeah.
that witness.
Exactly. But I remember with this with this girl at the time, she was my manager. Different person from the other stuff. They put me in the office with her, shut the door, and was like, talk, and then see what happens. And then she starts like, she breaks down, starts bawling, crawling her eyes out. She's like, I don't know I've never had from all this stuff. And, you know, like, I'm not saying this like making fun. Like, she was telling me her sob story, which was very sad.
Sure, but you're just also like, okay, well, I'm still uncomfortable.
Yeah, and then, well, the thing is, I was like, okay, now you know never to do this again and
Right.
to act like this
Yeah.
again. At
But,
least
like,
in my head, that's what I thought, and that's not really how it works out. But
Because again, imagine if it was the other way around and she said, hey,
right to call the fucking
so
cops.
and so sexually assaulted or harassed me. Well, we'll go in a room together and figure it out. What?
Right?
That's not how you handle anything. And I do feel for, like, I've had clients who have been in corporate offices, engineers, and a good friend of a client that's turned a really good friend of mine became comfortable and told me like, yeah, well, there's a girl at work that like harasses me, but like no one takes it serious, and it's like, oh, she's a woman, and I'm just like, that's still not cool too. Like, we need to have that standard all the way around, because being uncomfortable is being uncomfortable.
Right? Like, 'cause
Whether
as a
you're
man-
physically threatening to me or not, I'm uncomfortable.
Right, like as a man, I don't know what I'm gonna do. If it's a guy, I'll push him aside.
Right.
If it escalates, I will continue to escalate.
Right.
You know, I'll be like, I have my level of force. I have for men can include all of these instances.
Yeah.
When it's a woman, maybe this is not, you know. There's a line in Shaft where Samuel L. Jackson, he's like, I'm an equal opportunity ass whooper. And I'm like, I'm not that equal opportunity ass whooper where I can't be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Right.
Fuck off.
Right.
I just, there's something in my brain that just stops it. I just can't do it. And I don't know what the fuck to do.
There's a double standard for sure.
Yeah.
It's not cool either.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's cool, but I genuinely, I'm like, what the fuck do you do?
Yeah, what do you do? And
you know?
Any workplace, just like the show, is not showing that they have a safe environment or someone they can go to.
Right? Like, I thought that was what was going to happen, is the kid was going to be like, I don't know. But he's not. He's like,
fuck it.
Let's go. Get it. Eat this ass.
That shit was so crazy. I mean, and then it ends with, like we said, spoiler alert, Armand dies.
Yeah.
And it kind of cuts back to, like, everyone boards the plane, just like in the beginning of the show. And I think his death really kind of is like an overall play, like, for the metaphor of death, of, like, death for the capitalism, the satire demise of society. Like, that's what I got from it, you know, just that whole feel. Because then at the very end, you see the new ship come and they're like all over again with different people. And it's just like, that's literally what it's like.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. It doesn't, no matter what. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to ask. You ever had to deal with death at your job?
Sadly, I think I've mentioned before, like, I've had a client pass. And I did work with one lady who had, like, a super abusive husband, and she got to a point, like, coming to work with, like, black eyes and shit, and then she just kind of stopped working, and I always hoped she, like,
got out
because she wasn't coming back. But nothing to the, like, scenery of, like, what this portrayed, which I'm thankful for. I'm sure you probably have, huh?
Yeah. Well, like, I know people who've gotten injured or died, like, back in my, you know, roughnecking days, I guess. But that was the closest thing to something like this. Was there was someone who was murdered behind Chipotle and put in the trunk of a car, and then that car was just there for months.
And you worked there and saw the car?
Yeah, it was there for months, and it stank so bad, and like forever. It was parked by the dumpster. It was like 20 yards away, and it just kept stinking and stinking. And it was one of the only times they ever shut down the store. Was someone backed into the car on accident and popped the trunk.
Oh,
and
fuck.
Everything got released, and a bunch of people started throwing up.
Yeah.
Everyone ran away.
Fucking hazard at that point.
And then they were like, we called the cops, and we were like, something's wrong. And then they were like, yep, there's a body in there.
When I worked at Sport Clips, it didn't happen while I was there, but it was still crazy. You ever been inside of Sport Clips? The ones with all the TVs and sports on?
No, I've been inside of Great Clips.
Yeah,
Similar.
So they have that, like, big front desk that's kind of like half the entrance before you walk behind where all the chairs are at. And then they usually have a back room where, like, the washer and dryer kind of break room is. At Sport Clips, at every Sport Clips, there's 2 panic buttons. One under the desk in the front and one in the back, like, corner to, like, the washer and dryer. Because a lady who worked at Sport Clips, her ex came in with a gun and was waving it around, threatening to kill everyone in there if she didn't leave with him. I also have the opinion of, this is usually a place where men come because it's like Sport Clips. You're not telling me one motherfucker didn't even try. Y'all didn't fucking tackle his dude to the ground. Anyway, she leaves with him because she's like, you know, I'm not going to put everyone else in threat. Leaves, and he kills her and him in the car, like right outside. So now they have panic buttons in there, so you can just instantly call the police. But that's so scary and sad, you know?
Yeah, that's fucked up. I remember we had panic buttons at Chipotle. We didn't have panic buttons at Lucky's.
Probably should have.
We definitely should have. I remember. I'll leave you with this story out there, folks.
There you go.
Where Lucky's gambling place, a lot of gambling addicts. A lot of people come in on drugs, whatever, but
Not in their greatest mindset.
not in their greatest mindsets. So, it was late one night, and I was working by myself, and you know, on slow nights, I'd literally just like read a book or watch a show on my computer or something like that, and I'm just sitting at the front desk waiting for someone to come in. So I look up because, you know, it's dark. You see, you know, in the corner of your eye, you see someone coming in. I'm like, oh, someone's coming in. Let me put this away.
Yeah.
Get ready. So I look up, and then I see a guy in a welder's mask.
Ooh, that's scary.
And I was like, what the fuck? And then the guy grabs the door, flings it open, and then picks up a chainsaw.
No way.
100%. And then walks up to the counter. And then the counter is like, you know, you guys can't see, but it's literally not even 10 feet, like from the door to the counter. So I had a gun because I kept a gun with me. I didn't have to tell anyone I kept a gun on me until this instance.
Yeah.
Where I had to, you know, I called the manager and was like, hey, I pulled a gun on a customer.
Just, by the way.
Yeah. But so
other than that,
took out a gun and was like, what the fuck are you doing, man? And then the guy's like, huh? And then he picks up his welder's mask and he was like, oh, it's just me, man. I didn't have any money today, and I was wondering if you could, like, loan me some money for this
fucking
chainsaw and maybe this welder's mask. They're worth a good bit of money, and if I win, I'll pay you back, or I'll come back later and pick it up. And I was like, fuck no, man, we are not a pawn shop. You get the fuck out of here.
That's what I was thinking, like, bitch, you better go to a fucking pawn shop.
And then he was like, I'm sorry to scare you, man. It's not a big deal, man.
It is.
You know, I just...
He came in with a mask and a chainsaw.
Like...
To almost essentially what feels like a bingo.
Right? And I was like, you couldn't have told me that you had it, like, in the car and then come in? You come in swinging the chainsaw? And he's like, it's not on. And I was like, I don't give a shit that it's not on. But they got a big kick out of it because on the camera, there's no audio.
Right.
So all they see is a masked man come in on low res with a chainsaw, hold it up, and then me go and just pointing the gun at him until he opens his mask and is like, what's going on? And I'm like,
Jesus Christ.
That's probably the craziest thing I've ever had happen to me at a job.
If anyone gets anything out of this fucking podcast episode, one, be real empathetic to us, okay?
Yeah.
Because if you don't know, now you know. This is what it's fucking like. Two, just for like the people who complained in the reviews about this show, if I didn't like any of the characters, it's because that's how y'all really are. We don't fucking like you either, okay?
Like, you are the worst.
You are the problem. But if you do know, and you respect us and have empathy for the job we choose to have, or don't have much of a choice and are just trying to get by, just be fucking nice to us. Give us some fucking grace.
I'm not even saying you have to be nice. Just don't be crazy.
You're right. Just be
dick.
Decent.
Be nothing. You know? Have a nothing interaction with your local person. And
if you want to be nice and go the extra mile, we really fucking appreciate it. And honestly, I've had my day made. And luckily, I'm at a point where all my clients I love, and I'm very picky, and I get to go into work and love everyone who sits in my chair and know there's a level of respect and a boundary that will never be crossed. So I don't have to worry anymore. But that's very privileged of me, even in the service industry. So I always just give everyone that grace. I hope you do the same. I hope you just step away from your lifestyle and work and realize, all right, this person across the counter is also a real fucking person and
Yeah.
not a robot.
Who is dealing with some shit,
Exactly.
probably, and doesn't need any of yours.
Exactly. So
know?
on that note, you stay safe.
Yeah. Please.
Be nice. And we will see you next time.
Yep. And speaking of,
Oh.
don't forget to tip. Speaking of tips, check us out on Patreon. Check out This is a Coping Mechanism podcast on socials, YouTube, and Patreon. If you want to throw us a buck or two, we're still in the service industry.
Yeah.
We're serving you. You love this show.
And if not, word of mouth, tell your friends, post it on social media. All
Right.
that's always appreciated.
And if you listen, I love you.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.